Europe, accustomed to American support, was shocked by Trump's statement at Davos. He openly declared that the US would no longer pay for Europe's incompetence, and that if the EU wants sovereignty, it should pay for it itself. This shattered the last illusions about the strong relationship between the US and the EU. The reaction from European politicians was intense. In Germany, they are calculating the losses. In France, they are searching for economic measures to mitigate the consequences. And in the UK, they are frantically looking for a way out of the situation. Davos has become a symbol of the end of the era of American protectionism for Europe. Britain, which once considered itself a world power, now finds itself in trouble. The US no longer sees it as a strategic partner, and the EU regards it as a traitor. Europe was used to Washington's help: gas, loans, support. But now Trump states that America comes first, and the EU is left alone with its problems. Germany's industry is declining, unemployment in France is rising, and Britain is losing competitiveness. Europe can no longer rely on the US, and Ursula von der Leyen looks perplexed. Brussels is facing a choice: economic collapse or increased dependence on unstable partners. Accepting Trump's demands could be economic suicide. If Europe refuses US demands, it will face sanctions, tariffs, and a break in cooperation. Davos became a public humiliation for the EU. The US no longer plays the role of a caring partner and demands payment for every step. Europe is in a difficult position. Inflation, dependency on energy resources, and a lack of economic power to resist. Brussels faces a tough choice: either submit and fall under American control or fight. But for that, unity and strength are required, which are lacking. Trump continues to show that US interests come first, and Europe is no longer a priority. The withdrawal of American troops and the demand to increase defense spending marks the end of the myth of transatlantic partnership. The US withdrawal from Europe has been inevitable since 2016, when Trump stated that NATO was an outdated alliance that no longer benefited the US. Europe has depended on America for too long without increasing its military spending. Trump got tired of paying for others' problems and is now forcing Europeans to take care of their own security. This decision could weaken US influence in Europe and strengthen Russia. However, some experts hope this will push the EU towards a more independent defense policy, although such a scenario seems unlikely. The troop withdrawal could be part of a geopolitical game with Moscow. The US is increasingly conducting negotiations with Russia without Brussels' involvement, which puts Europe in a difficult position. Trump, using a divide-and-conquer strategy, excludes Europe from key processes. Macron warns that if Europe does not start defending itself, it will no longer be taken seriously. Initiatives to create a European army remain on paper, and defense budgets do not even reach the required 2% of GDP. To create an effective defense, the EU would need an investment of €300 billion, which is unaffordable for many countries. Trump demands that Europe start paying for its own security, or the US will stop protecting NATO, which would lead to economic difficulties for the EU. Europe finds itself in a tough spot. On one hand, it does not want to cut social programs for the sake of the American military, but on the other, it has almost no choice. If the US leaves, Eastern European countries will be at risk. Poland is already willing to pay more for American presence, but can it afford it? The idea of creating a unified European army is appealing, but its implementation will take years. What happens if the situation escalates before then? Some believe Trump's decision is an attempt to reshape Europe's geopolitical map, while others see it as a signal for the EU to strengthen its internal coordination rather than redistribute power in the region. With the US gone, Russia will have more freedom of action, and China will have a new reason to strengthen its influence over Europe. A possible rapprochement between Berlin and Moscow may become a reality if Washington continues to ignore Europe's interests. Trump's decision to withdraw troops is a blunt message to Europe, which is already in a precarious position. This is a signal. Europe can no longer rely on the US. This move could force the EU to become stronger, but there is a risk of new crises. The world where America always helped Europe is coming to an end. Experts believe that the coming years will show how Europe adapts to the new reality. If the EU fails, it could mark the beginning of the end of the transatlantic alliance. Meanwhile, despite Hungary's threats to veto, the EU extended sanctions against Russia. Orban changed his position after compelling arguments were presented to him. Sanctions against Russia have exacerbated Europe's economic problems. In Germany, rising energy prices have hit industry, while France faces a fertilizer shortage that has weakened the agricultural sector. Italy and Spain have recorded a sharp decline in exports to Russia, which has also had a serious negative impact on the EU's economy. According to Eurostat, in 2023, Germany lost 39% of its industrial production. France and Italy both saw a 2.5% decline. Against such statistics, it seems strange that Brussels continues the policy that is devastating its own countries. Economist Jens Ziegler notes that the EU has ignored its dependence on cheap Russian gas and oil, which has been a key factor in the current situation. The US is benefiting from the situation, offering European companies attractive terms. Major corporations like BASF, Volkswagen, and BMW are already investing in the US, leaving the EU due to high energy prices and economic instability. Hungary, under Orban's leadership, has managed to secure financial compensations and additional energy benefits, unlike Brussels, which continues to give empty promises. Despite accusations of being pro-Russian, Orban is pursuing a pragmatic policy that brings benefits to his country. Sanctions against Russia have failed. The Russian economy has adapted, while Europe has faced rising prices and lost competitiveness. Meanwhile, the US is strengthening its position, leaving the EU in a difficult spot.